Mr. Olympia Sergio Oliva, or The Myth, is the only bodybuilder in history to defeat Arnold Schwarzenegger in the Arnold Classic and go down in history as one of the best, if not the greatest bodybuilders of all time. Sergio was a Cuban immigrant who came to America and worked as a police officer, a parent, and among the most dedicated and humble bodybuilders that has ever lived. Known for his competition with Arnold, Sergio's death led Arnold to write, "Sergio Oliva was a good friend as well as one of the finest bodybuilders of all time. A competitive competitor with a huge personality, one of a kind." Biography. Sergio Oliva, a Cuban dynamo, was born and nurtured in the country of his father. His father encouraged him to enlist in Fulgencio Batista's army at the age of 16 in order to combat communism. Sergio stayed in Cuba after losing the fight to Fidel Castro, although he was fortunate in that he did not get any injuries. He spent most of his time on the bench. When a member of the Cuban weightlifting squad passed Sergio a few times, the guy asked him what he was looking at and then complimented on Sergio's physique before handing Sergio a card stating that he was the expert manager of the team. Joining the Cuban weightlifting team. Initially, Sergio was concerned about the dietary requirements for becoming a professional weightlifter, and this was his first concern. "Leave it to me to worry about it. All you have to do is come and see me." When Sergio arrived to the Roger Gonzalez gym in the town of Guanabacoa the next day, he was instructed to go directly to the lifting bench without saying anything. Sergio was forced to hoist an Olympic bar over his head by the other guy, who loaded it with two 45-pound weights on each side, 220 pounds in total, and demanded that he lift it about his head. He executed it with grace and ease. That was the end of it. The team's general manager hired Sergio to clean the gym, paid him on a weekly basis, and began teaching him. Sergio, a 21-year-old amateur, smashed 3 Cuban records in succession, including 2 that he had previously set himself in the lifts that preceded the competition. For the rest of his time in Russia, Sergio worked on perfecting his technique. He came with 900 pounds, but by the end of his time in Russia, Sergio was training with 1,300 pounds. Defecting from Cuba. After that, he came back to Cuba to train again for Pan America Games, which would be held in Kingston, Jamaica. His life was forever altered as a result of this competition. When Sergio returned to his rooms after a successful day competing, he got past the armed guards to make his way to the American consulate, where he applied for asylum status from Fidel Castro's communist administration. They were followed by Fidel Castro's full Olympian lifting squad and their security guards, who were also there to support them. His next destination was Miami, Florida, where he found employment as a television repairman before moving north to Chicago in 1963 on the suggestion of federal authorities. This placed him as far away from the Cuban people as possible, as well as from the possibility of any of Castro's security forces catching up with him. Bodybuilding, which has been outlawed in Cuba under the communist regime, was once again legal for him to partake in once he arrived in Chicago. He was a wonderful, wonderful person. We didn't spend a lot of time around each other back in the day since I lived on the west side and he lived in Chicago, but we did connect when we were at contests and other events that we were both involved with. In following years, he returned to Arnold Classic on a number of occasions. I had a tremendous deal of respect and regard for him, and this included his personality, work ethic, appearance, and everything else. Sergio will never be replaced, I assure it. Everything that comes after him is a fabrication. He was the first and the best. He was known as the Myth. Competing in the IFBB. Sergio joined the International Federation of Bodybuilders, IFBB, in 1966, where he won the titles of IFBB Mr. World Tall category and Mr. World overall. This was only the start. Sergio won the IFBB Mr. Olympia title in 1967, repeated the feat unchallenged in 1968, and defeated his future arch rival, Arnold Schwarzenegger, in the 1969 Mr. Olympia finals. Sergio and Arnold fought for the title of Mr. Olympia once again in 1970, with the Austrian bringing home the prize, which Sergio and some others feel was taken from him by a bribe or fraud. Sergio left the International Federation of Bodybuilders (IFBB) in 1972 after losing against Arnold Schwarzenegger for the second time. He then joined the World Bodybuilding Guild and won all they had. Following this accomplishment, he entered the WABBA Federation, where he went on to win a number of matches. Sergio's final IFBB competition and retirement. IFBB Mr. Olympia 1985 was Sergio's last professional bodybuilding competition, where he finished 8th for the second time in a row, while Lee Haney won his second straight Mr. Olympia title. Sergio Myth was intended to compete in the 1986 Olympia, but a personal dispute with his spouse turned tragically and the 45-year-old Myth was shot 5 times, ending his career. Despite being fatally wounded, Sergio drove himself to a hospital in Chicago where he was treated and healed. Sergio put forth a lot of effort during his whole bodybuilding professional career. His ethic was unwavering, despite the fact that he spent long days at a foundry and then followed them up with grueling 3 to 4 hour gym workouts. He also spent 27 years of his professional career as a police officer with the Chicago Police Force, where he wore custom-made uniforms that accommodated his 60-inch chest. Sergio Oliva passed suddenly on November 12, 2012, as a result of alleged kidney difficulties, left his son Sergio Oliva Jr., who also has continued in his father's footsteps. In the history of Mr. Olympia, he was the first to die away. Numerous people consider Sergio Oliva to have had one of the best body shape of all time, and he is the only bodybuilder to have ever defeated Arnold Schwarzenegger to win the Mr. Olympia title. Some people believe I do nothing except pump the weights. My arms are proof that what I'm doing is effective, so you can judge for yourself. Training. Sergio Oliva's training was a little out of the ordinary for a bodybuilder who didn't know what the term overtraining meant in his own language. It had taken a toll on Sergio's joints from his early weightlifting days. The other bodybuilders said, after a while he couldn't lock out lifts since he would break his elbows or bend his knees backwards. Sergio changed how he did things. He could lift heavy weights while just using a portion of his range of motion, since he would be less likely to sustain an injury if he didn't utilize his whole range of motion. Sergio would likewise work hard, and the typical session for him would last 2 to 3 hours after a long day at a physical demanding job in a factory. Sergio used to complete 20 to 30 sets of exercises, keeping his form relaxed and the strain in the target region while avoiding the connective tissues of his body. A typical Sergio training session includes a broad array of exercise to ensure that the whole target muscle is worked out completely. Besides this, he was well known for his antagonist supersets, which included exercising opposite muscle groups at the same time. You have to put in long hours all day. It was so intense that I only dieted 3 weeks before each competition, from the very first one in 1984 to the very last one in 1985. I didn't have to diet since I was consuming everything. Nutrition. It has been said that Sergio's diet consisted mostly of anything he desired. Even before to the challenge, he was known to have consumed hamburgers, hot dogs, and carbonated beverages. A supervisor arrived into the lunch area during a shift to see if he could figure out what secret diet Sergio was following to maintain his body, only to find Oliva devouring 2 packs of candy bars and a can of Mountain Dew. Sergio would bring a thermos of black coffee to training sessions, and when questioned why, he said that it provided him with energy while also making him sweat. Water was set out for consumption after the exercise. I'm not sure what it was, but I definitely have it. It seems as though I had taken care of myself. I don't smoke, I don't drink, and I don't engage in any of the activities. I'd simply go to work. Idols and influencers. Sergio's training buddy is the leading candidate for the title of his most significant impact. Bob really defeated Sergio in the 1966 Mr. America competition, and as a result, he decided to retire from competitive sports after that. With the exception of Bob Gaida, nothing is known about the factors that shaped Oliva's decision to pursue a bodybuilding career. Bob Gaida and Sergio were still good pals. I am a huge fan of anything bodybuilding. My life revolves on bodybuilding. What we can learn from Sergio Oliva. Sergio Oliva was regarded as one of the finest bodybuilders of all time. The Cuban refugee, on the other hand, was one of the most modest people I have ever met. One of the most extreme examples of this is to add 3 hours of instruction after 10 hours of labor-intensive employment. Sergio's many years as a police officer with the Chicago Police Department are also noteworthy. Although the majority of bodybuilders choose to go to the warmer environment of the coast of California, where they spend their days lounging in the sun and seeking to break into the lucrative Hollywood professions, Sergio remained loyal to himself.